So you said social media is sort of not natural for you, and earlier we were talking about taking you go in order to sort of not feel like you're missing home when you're out in nature. It's useful for you because it's part of your income, and more than your income, it's your profession, and you're creating something by being out there. So I think a trap that social media offers is that you begin to see the world in a consumptive way, in which everything you look at is immediately framed in your head for the creation and consumption for others. I think it's the case with all forms of art, and it's sort of the catch-22 that art gives you a fresh sight in things, but it also, an art being super general, any form of production, social media is creation of some sort. Do you feel like social media does that more for? I've done photography and writing in the past, and when I'm very much in those modes, there's a slight remove from the present situation, which when I feel it's most acute with social media, and when I feel it, I really feel uncomfortable with it. Am I doing this to create this thing for others? I think it's beautiful to create for others to consume, but I also want my experience to be very much in the present moment. Do you feel that social media does that differently from writing, photography, and do you feel that sort of separation even when you were just doing writing and photography, the sort of step removed from the present moment?
Sure. Social media, I think we have so much autonomy on the way we present whatever we're looking at. We as humans tend to sometimes give in to our more carnal instincts to try and generate, let's say, the greatest amount of likes, right? And we can often misrepresent something in social media because of that. And I'll give you an example here in a minute. Writing for a magazine, especially a technical magazine like Shooting Times, on the flip side, is very close to a peer-reviewed journal. If you say something that's inflated, your editors are going to catch it, and they're going to call you out for it. And if they don't, the readers, the longtime readers that know their stuff, are going to write in and call you out on it. So with writing, it's the truest, most honest form of conveying information, still to this day, because you've got so many knowledgeable eyes examining your work and making sure, one, that you didn't screw up in the information you're presenting, two, that it's grammatically correct, and three, that their readers are not led to believe something they shouldn't be by a biased viewpoint, right? Digital media is a big step removed from that, because basically anybody can write and present what they want, and if they're good enough at language, convincing writing, or YouTubing, whatever it is, they can, without consequence, generally, present very biased opinions. So this is why anything that's digital is certainly not to be automatically trusted like you almost can with writing, printed word, right? Now, the good digital outlets also have editors, and they don't let their contributors get away with inflated opinions or biased information, anything like that. But how do you know which ones those are? The big organizations, Outdoor Life, Field and Stream, those guys with those big digital presences, those are going to be accurate. But Joe Blow's blog about how he shot a 700-inch mule deer at 1,900 yards with a .22 Hornet, you can publish stuff like that, right? And state it as fact in the digital world. So you have to be careful. You have to read with a suspicious and discerning eye. Podcasting is kind of like that too. I mean, I could get on my podcast and say it's good to hunt geese with a 700 Nitro Express. And there's nothing more ludicrous, but I could state it. I'd lose a whole bunch of listeners. Yeah, there is a consequence there. But so wrapping back to the social media and that example I wanted to present, shortly after moving to Idaho, I became acquainted with a man in the construction industry. He was doing some work on the house we were building. And he heard that I'm a writer and do podcasts, and very cheerful but very blunt individual that's since become one of my very good friends and a good hunting partner. He looked me right in the eye and says, "So are you real?" I was like, "What do you mean? Am I really a writer?" He's like, "No. What you say and post and stuff, is it real or is it inflated?" I was like, "What?" I was so discombobulated by his question that I didn't quite know what he meant. And he said, "Okay, look this up. Get on Instagram." He doesn't do Instagram. He said, "Okay, look up so-and-so." This is my brother-in-law. He said, "Look at that buck he shot. Looks like, how big is that?" And I was like, "Well, the picture's a little, compressed, right? He's got really close to it." But I'd say just at first glance, that's like a 180-inch mule deer. And he's like, "Yep, that was a 145-inch deer." Mm-hmm. He says he does that with everything. He uses photography to make his animals look huge. And then he says sometimes he'll walk, 100 yards off the road and pop something, and he writes about, or in his post, he won't necessarily state it, but he'll say, "I hunted really rough country for 4 days before finding this buck." Well, maybe he did. Maybe he's in his truck in rough country and he was out there 4 days, but he leaves the truck part out, right? So he says, "That's what I mean. Are you real?" Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, I try to be. I do my best to be." And I said, "I can't get away with photographs like that because if you know anything about cameras, you know how they can be manipulated, and editors don't let you get away with that, and anybody else that's doing it is going to know." Anyway, so I think on social media, that's like the furthest removed from the truth source of transferring information there can be in our current world. Print, of course, is the most accurate. Social media is on the far end because we're not just, as humans, we're not just writing about something that we want people to appreciate and gain information and knowledge from. We're trying to make ourselves look appealing. Mm. And it's very much human nature to make that decent buck. I mean, there's no shame in shooting a 145-inch 4x4 mule deer, particularly if he's a fully mature deer. But there is some shame. You should have some shame in trying to make him look like a 180-inch deer, right?
Yeah. And it also seems like rather than being, I guess, depending on the type of social media, it seems to be related to the duration. Like, although you're saying writing is the most accurate, I can see what you mean by writing being the most accurate. You can bullshit writing in that it's hard to establish authenticity in the internet age where all these numbers that you're writing about guns, you could be pulling them directly off the internet. Whereas I think it's very hard to bullshit that on a podcast. And you were saying, if you gave an inappropriate suggestion for hunting geese, there'd be no consequences except for the main consequence, which is, people would know that you're inauthentic or that you're foolish or something like that, and you would feel the repercussions of it. Interestingly, social media has such a short duration and that such a short form that it's, perhaps the least thoughtful. It's also got the lowest barrier for criticism, but that doesn't seem to hold it to a higher bar. Like it's very easy for all of us to go on and go, call that guy out on some nonsense, but that doesn't seem to be a limiting factor.
Yeah, and on that note, the so-called internet trolls, I have no patience for them. I just scroll right past anything. I don't get much of that, thankfully, but I have friends that do, other writers and so forth that have a bigger digital footprint in their writing and so forth. And to me, I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but any comment I make, I ask myself, would I be willing to make that to this producer's face? Yeah. Man to man, or woman to woman, whatever, woman to man, man to woman. Would you feel good, about yourself as a human, about standing, looking that person in the eye and saying that? Or are you hiding behind the protection of the Ethernet? Yeah. If you are, go spend a little introspection and see if you can't come to terms with being a real person again.